So if everything goes well today, we are going to make the nose for our new product that'll be released in, I don't know, a couple months when we're done developing it here. The Spire Pen version 2. Our very first product was a metal 3D printed pen that we called the Spire. It was our first Kickstarter. It was fairly successful. I think it made about $2.5 grand on Kickstarter. But we ended up running into manufacturing issues, which is actually what pushed us down this whole CNC path, and really one of the reasons why we are where we are now. The next version of our pen, which I'm going to keep calling the Spire for now, but it may get a different name down the line, but the next version of the pen is going to share a lot of heritage with that original Kickstarter pen, but will be completely different. No 3D printed parts. It'll all be done on the lathe and on the mill, machined from scratch, 100% by us. The only part in this pen that we are not going to make ourselves, except maybe a fastener or two, is the ink cartridge. We originally designed the Spire 1 to be something that could only be made via 3D printing. If you look at the design, it's very open, it's very airy, which helped reduce our manufacturing costs, but also be something very difficult to do with other methods. So on this one, I think we're going to stay in the same vein. I don't even know if we're going to use the lathe over there to do any manufacturing on this pen. My plan is to do it all on the Pocket NC, because to my knowledge, nobody else yet is making a pen on a 5-axis CNC. There's lots of people doing it on a 2-axis lathe, a couple more people doing it with a live tooled lathe. I think most of the major pen makers are doing it on a live tooled lathe. And I know John Grimsmo is starting to get his Saga pens moved on to his Kern, but I want to build this pen from the ground up for the 5-axis Pocket NC. In the future, we may need to offload some of the cutting to the lathe, like some of the heavy material removal steps, because that lathe, relative to its size, is really good at material removal, whereas the Pocket NC is a little limited there. But I want to be able to have the flexibility of the 5-axis and do something that you couldn't make on any other machine. I haven't forgotten about the watch project. From the beginning, I've always intended that to be a long-term thing that's going on in the background. I really want to get the watch right, and I don't want to put any pressure on the timeline. So that may be, a year or two down the road. But the pen, we're aiming for around Christmas. So material is in the mill. All of my offsets are set. My tool length has been probed, and I think we're ready to get cutting. I suspect that my speeds and feeds will be too aggressive for this fixturing. The fixturing is done with the ER40 collet, which is pretty rigid, but I have a long stick out relative to the length of this material, so I may have to dial back my speeds and feeds. Okay, that actually wasn't that bad. I'm using a damaged tool here because I broke the tip on my favorite end mill when I was doing a branding iron. And you can see the tool marks from that, but I don't know, this wasn't terrible. Huh. Okay, that's kind of actually worse than I thought. You look at it up close, and you can see some pretty distinctive stepping from the chipped end mill. I'm going to change to the OSG version of this tool, which is in slightly better shape, and run it again. Huh, that's interesting. I haven't seen steps like that before. Alright, same tool path, different tool, maybe hopefully slightly less abused than the last one I used. It'll mostly just be doing spring passes. Still some tool marks on there, but the weird stepping is pretty much gone. So I think we can move on to thread milling. This is a no-name thread mill that I got off of eBay. I'm actually pretty happy with it. I guess it is my first thread mill, so I don't know any better. My only complaint is that the neck on it is a little too long. You could thread like, I think, an inch deep hole or an inch and a quarter hole, which I'll never do. But it works. Alright, let's take a look at those. At first I thought they weren't cutting deep enough, but these are really small threads. I think I might have to look at them under the microscope. Unfortunately, I won't be able to test fit until I do the other part of the part. Because I do not have a... This is a 5/16 by 48 thread. So relatively large and very, very fine. Let's see what it looks like under the microscope. Yeah, those might not be threads. Wish I had more light, but... I don't think those are deep enough. I think I need to check my settings in Fusion. I have a theory that I plugged in the wrong tool diameter. Okay, my major diameter checks as 8/10 oversized, which I think is fine. If anything, that should be helping my thread situation, not hurting it here. It just seems like I'm getting square crests on these, not pointy crests. I just adjusted my pitch diameter offset in Fusion and reposted the code. I think that may help. We'll see. I'm kind of shooting blind here because I can't measure what I'm going for. I just know that it doesn't look right. So it's possible that A, I'm just not seeing it right. B, I wouldn't recognize it even if it is right. So I know nothing here. I think I found my issue. I was using the pitch diameter instead of the minor diameter in my calculations, which is why it was too big. This should fix it. This one looks much better. I think that did it. It's still really hard to see any of this stuff. There we go. It's maybe not easy to see, but our threads are not flat anymore. They're pointy, like threads are supposed to be. Okay, so just something wrong in cam. We're good. There maybe is a better view. There you go. You can see the profile. Here's the thread mill. I wonder if we've broken down the corners on this. There you go. Yeah, those tooth forms, well, some of them don't look right. Some of them do. Huh. Might be time to get a new thread mill. It's possible that this thread mill isn't designed for threads with this tight of a pitch. Maybe it's not sharp enough. I don't think it says. It says wear safety glasses. That's all it says. Next tool is a 1/8 inch Harvey 2 flute. And this one's going to get a fairly long stick out because it's going to go cut a pocket deep down inside the bottom of the pen there. is tabbed off and ready to be flipped for op 2. I thought this tab was going to be a little bit thinner. But, I mean, this is fine. It works. Going thinner would probably be dangerous. I just knocked off the tab on my belt grinder. And now I'm going to flip it over and put it back in. This part is really short in here. So I'm going to take my piece of stock left over from the last op and stick it underneath the support to collet all the way through. So that when I tighten this down, I'm not squishing my collet funny. It was a super cool toolpath, even if it wasn't the most efficient one in the world. The thing I failed to consider is that the rotary axes on this machine are really slow. So even though I was telling it to cut 60 inches a minute, it was actually cutting, I don't know, 5. Because that toolpath was supposed to take something like 3 minutes to run, and it took like 25. So that definitely hurt my finish, and it is not going to be a good long run toolpath. I could just do this with a ball end mill. I was just trying to do something cooler. But I think this should still work as a prototype. So now we just need to use a 1/16 end mill to drill the last hole for the pen to stick out of. So that seemed to work, but I don't think my bore went all the way through. I guess what could have happened is if I didn't get my setup in exactly the right place, if the part was lower than Fusion is expecting, it wouldn't have bored deep enough, which is why it's not going all the way through. So I'm going to give it some extra distance in Fusion and rerun that bore. Time to take it out. That should be a finished part. Well, definitely not the prettiest part I've ever made, but it's a part. That's a good start as far as I'm concerned. Now I need to make the rest of the thing. Well, I was going to do a test fit of the ink cartridge, but I can't remember where I put them right now, so that'll have to wait until next time. I appreciate you guys watching this long. I'm going to start working on the bodies probably later this week, and maybe hopefully by next weekend I'll have the video of making the body for this pen.